The Airbus A380 was introduced in 2007 and was initially hailed as a revolutionary aircraft, offering unprecedented capacity and comfort for long-haul flights. The latter has remained a sticking point as airlines look to outdo each other on a consistent basis. However, the A380-800 faced challenges that led to its limited success in the market. The size of the aircraft, which is immense, came with high operating costs, and changing trends in aviation contributed to its struggles drastically, ultimately leading Airbus to decide, or be forced to, however you choose to look at it, cease production just over a decade after starting it. As the aviation industry evolves, we have time to ponder the question, will Airbus release a new type of A380, or do we even need one? The A380-800, with its sheer size, meant the ability to carry hundreds upon hundreds of passengers, no matter the configuration, was now present. Airlines would focus on designing a layout that would address their own respective needs for, say, routes where they would adhere to what customers wanted for their journeys. The space available, which was an increase on the 747, allowed airlines to get radical with their upper classes especially, and offer products not seen before on other aircraft types, a reason why the aircraft has been adored so much by travellers throughout its years. But despite this, the plane faced its fair share of struggles, and primarily the overarching problem was the lack of orders it would receive. In an attempt to breathe new life into the program, Airbus explored the concept of an A380 Plus. You may recall this, but if you don't, let me take a moment to refresh. The proposed A380 Plus aimed to improve the aircraft's efficiency and economics, making it more attractive to airlines. On the surface, this makes a lot of sense. Airbus would offer features on this Plus variant, such as winglets, a higher maximum takeoff weight, more range, and the ability to carry even more passengers. However, Airbus ultimately would decide not to proceed with the A380 Plus. Apart from a grand reveal at a leading airshow, little was really heard of the Plus ever again. It just kind of faded into the night, similar to how maybe some would have argued production would end for the series just a few years later. And ultimately, an announcement on the closure of production would come only a few years after the A380 Plus was revealed. It arrived with orders being cancelled and a lack of interest, among other problems that meant sustaining production just wouldn't make sense, but also wouldn't really be possible. When the global pandemic arrived, high-capacity planes felt the brunt of the effects of the drop in travel demand. A significant shift saw airline priorities move towards smaller and more economical aircraft, resulting in airlines grounding or retiring their A380 fleets. There were a few carriers, though, that remained hopeful that demand would return and the A380 would play a pivotal part in the long-term operations of that respective company. But again, there was only a few of those that existed. The pandemic, meanwhile, accelerated the retirement plans for several A380 operators, as while some airlines were flying the type, were already prior to the pandemic beginning to find ways to phase out the aircraft. The travel restrictions made these companies reassess their fleet strategies in the face of an unprecedented market, which again makes sense. It was an unfortunate reality of the period, but left the A380 fleet decimated, even as demand began crawling back. However, as demand returned, exterior pressures felt by plane makers would delay the next generation of aircraft arriving to these major airlines. As a result, these companies needed vital capacity to meet the returning demand, and if you kept track of the industry during the pandemic, you may recall that analysts and most companies were forecasting a very, very slow return to demand. Well, that didn't really happen. In fact, it came back in an instant. And for airlines that needed capacity and needed it quickly, they just couldn't keep up, which meant a plane like the A380 had a place again. And while I did mention that some airlines always said they would retain the type, there were others that made it very clear they never wanted to fly it again. Well, with demand returning, the tables turn for several of these companies, as they would return the plane to service. In a little bit of a resurgence for the aircraft in a post-COVID world, it presented the curious question of whether maybe the A380 came too early. Yes, that may actually sound a little bit odd, because it is a question that many previously would say the other way around, as in, did the A380 come too late in a dying age of the quad-engine era? Additionally, when we pair this with Emirates' stance of an A380 Neo type aircraft, it presents very many questions. So now we're all caught up, let's analyse. Emirates is the largest operator of the A380 and has expressed interest in Airbus developing a new version that would bring better efficiency. The idea was to enhance the A380's fuel efficiency and overall performance, potentially addressing some of the key concerns that were plaguing the original model. Concerns that Emirates did not believe were addressed with the A380 Plus concept. Remember that plane that Airbus revealed many years ago as a bit of a development study? Emirates stood pretty firm that it wasn't interested in a Plus, but they did make note that a Neo could be something they'd be after. However, despite Emirates' long-standing interest, Airbus hasn't proceeded with the A380 Neo due to a lack of broader market demand for such an aircraft, and the development costs, alongside maybe they would argue the limited interest from other airlines, made the business case for a new variant simply unviable. And while a lot of the focus will centre around Emirates' interest for an A380 Neo specifically, it is actually other comments from Sir Tim Clark and other carriers too that is what should be highlighted equally. That is the need for a plane with a larger capacity. As time has progressed, many people are starting to argue that Emirates could have a point. Slot restrictions won't get any better unless we build more airports and even if the infrastructure can allow it, expansion at potentially existing ones. But that is a long drawn out process that, as we know, with climate activists and much more, is quite difficult to achieve. So sending in high capacity airliners might just be the solution for some of these larger carriers. Plus, customers love it. Several factors must be weighed in though when considering the possibility of Airbus moving forward with a new version. On the positive side, the large capacity could be very relevant for airlines looking to operate into these slot-restricted airports or on high-traffic routes. I am also very aware that with this argument, you're only looking at a certain amount of customers that would be interested in such a plane, and would the development costs in relation to the orders mean that Airbus would break even? It is a valid concern to have. There are only so many carriers that can fill an Airbus A380, unlike, say, a 777X, 787, or A350. To conclude, many people will always argue between each other whether a new A380 will work, and talk of this will always remain, so long as we still face slot restriction problems, demand continues to grow, and there is a case for maybe a larger aircraft being required in some companies' business. However, equally on the other side of the spectrum, it is a reality that for now at least, isn't part of what Airbus is planning for the future. And your airline executives, and of course Emirates, can call all they want for maybe more high-capacity aircraft, but the simple reality is that if a plane maker doesn't choose to move ahead with it, then that plane won't exist for them. You can let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Specifically, I'd like to hear your opinions on the recent question that has been put forward of, did the Airbus A380 come too early, as it is experiencing a bit of a resurgence in the market and airlines are continuing to bring it back and delay the retirement for as long as possible? Or do you believe the eventual certification of other long-haul aircraft, such as namely the 777X, will alleviate this in the future and the A380 will one day have no place in our industry? You can let me know down below in the comments. Thanks a lot for your support here on the channel. Please do take care and also be safe, and I will indeed see you next time.